In a democracy, citizens need to be informed. Informed about policies, issues, homelessness, law enforcement, and social services. In order for people to make good decisions that affect their lives, they need to be informed. Conversations with Erroll Parker. Black Lives Matter is a global movement originating in the African American community. This organization campaigns against violence and systematic racism towards black people. Dawn Modkins is the co-founder of the Long Beach chapter of this organization, and she is here to discuss what they are doing to advance their mission in the city of Long Beach. Welcome to our program, Ms. Modkins.
Thank you, Erroll.
Black Lives Matter is a very provocative organization, and today we want to discuss with you what are you guys trying to do on a global basis as well as a national and regional and city basis? What are you guys trying to accomplish?
That's a big question. Global, national, and on a city basis. So as you know, or may not know, some viewers may or may not know, Black Lives Matter was born out of justice for Trayvon Martin. After Trayvon was murdered by vigilante.
Police?
No, George Zimmerman.
Yes.
Right, not
yes.
police.
No,
Maybe in his
George
mind
Zimmerman.
he thought he was the police.
Yes.
After his the murder of Trayvon, and then shortly after the acquittal of George Zimmerman, and just the how moved communities were across our country after feeling like for sure this guy is going to be held accountable for this. That 911 officer told him to fall back, and he took it upon himself to hunt Trayvon down and murdered him, and we all know that story. And so it was birthed out of that, literally as a hashtag on picket signs for justice for Trayvon Martin, hashtagged Black Lives Matter. And so, a few folks got together here in LA, Patrice Cullors, Melina Abdullah, a number of folks who had been doing some organizing work here in LA, and many who had not, just out of pure frustration and a need to feel like we have got to do something different, took the initiative to do that and birthed Black Lives Matter, and literally took to the streets to raise enormous awareness around this being a devastating harm on our children, on our black community, on our families. And so we've been carrying out that work since then, nationally and globally and locally.
One of the unique things about your organization is it's not one charismatic leader that we can point to, like in days of old, Martin Luther King or Stokely Carmichael or Malcolm X. It's a unit where the concept seems to be the primary thing that you're trying to do. Is that correct?
That is correct, right? No one person can carry the extent of work that it's going to take to begin to really hold these powers accountable, right? And I don't think we want there to be one person. This is a leaderful movement where everyone has a place, everyone has a lane, and it's going to take that broad level of, personal leadership by everyone to make change.
So each chapter is kind of sovereign, although the concept is a common denominator in terms of stop police violence against black people. So your chapter here in Long Beach, tell us some of the things that you're trying to do with the Long Beach Police Department and the black community.
Sure. So there's a guiding set of principles that we're at about 35 chapters across the nation. We're kind of gelled by these sets of guiding principles that we all are in agreement under and kind of live by.
Give us a couple of examples of those principles.
Sure. I would love to pull them up for you so I can give them to you exactly. Let's see.
Of course, we know it's police brutality is one of the things that.
Well, yeah, it's a little more.
And murder.
It's a little more these sets of principles. One moment.
And how long have you been involved with the Long Beach chapter? I mean, you co-founded the Long Beach chapter.
Yeah. So we started our chapter here in Long Beach probably right after a massive caravan that left from LA to Ferguson. So the end of 2014, the end of that summer, a few of us began to talk about, what can we do here in Long Beach? It was just that year later that Long Beach police, in 2015, murdered 15 people, killed 15 people unarmed. So we knew that that was something that we had to do in our own backyard.
Of those 15 people that were murdered, how many were African American? How many were Latino? What other races might have been involved in
It was mixed.
It was mixed.
It was mixed.
Predominantly African American, though?
Let's see. Tyler Woods, Dante Jordan, Faraz Marad, who I think he was brown.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these men were brown. Jason Consenti, Barry Prack, Noel Aguilar, Hector Morejon.
So most of them were Latino?
Brown. I don't think Jason was brown. Barry Prack was, he might have been Cambodian, I think.
I see.
So not all black. So this isn't,
Okay.
While we center Black lives and, make sure that the systems and institutions that we have to work around and work within are, holding them accountable for its anti-blackness, right? That's just what that means. That doesn't mean that. Let me just pause for a second because I'm reflecting on the principles and I want to
go right ahead.
pull them up
While
for
you're
you.
finding the principles, but there seems to be what you're saying also is a systematic way the police confront people in the community, not only black people but anyone. It seems that you are in odds about how the police departments in metropolitan cities approach citizens in terms of any conflict.
It's a little bit bigger than that. I'll give it to you. Can I go ahead and share with you the
You
principles?
can go right and read it.
So this is what kind of gels our network across the globe.
Okay.
So not just nationally, we have networks who have been building in Brazil, in Canada, in the UK,
Global.
in Australia, right? So while we're gelled by these sets of principles that keeps us in relationship, and allows us to be in loving accountability with one another,
Yes.
making sure that there aren't folks who are out doing the type of work that might be against what our intended focus for this network was.
That's right.
There's still a level of autonomy for each of our chapters and our networks around the world and our chapters across the nation to be able to tend to and address the very often unique types of issues that are coming up in folks' own immediate communities. So the sets of principles that we operate under, we're committed to acknowledging, respecting, and celebrating differences. We are committed to collectively, lovingly, and courageously working vigorously for freedom and justice for Black people, and by extension, all people. As we forge our path, we intentionally build and nurture a beloved community that is bonded together through beautiful struggle that is restorative and not depleting. We are unapologetically Black in our positioning. In affirming that Black lives matter, we need not qualify our position. To love and desire freedom and justice for ourselves is a necessary prerequisite for wanting the same for others. We see ourselves as a part of a global Black family that are aware of the different ways we are impacted or privileged as Black folks who exist in different parts of the world. So these are the types of, I know we have limited time, I don't want to spend it walking through all these, there are about 10, 12, 13 of them. But those are the types of commitments and principles that we are committed to with one another.
Now, one of the things that people are critical of Black Lives Matter is that they're confrontational politics or they're confrontational tactics that they use. Does that bother you in any way? You are for nonviolence, you do not support violence, but you do confront powers that be about the treatment of citizens in the community.
Confrontational? Define confrontational.
Well, you're speaking to power in maybe not so much a nice way. They've committed certain wrongs to citizens in the community, but you are not being very diplomatic. You're confronting them with rhetoric or sit-ins or whatever else you do. Would that be correct?
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't necessarily usually have these types of conversations. It's just interesting to me
How would
that
you
the
just,
term confrontational, right?
Okay.
Doesn't it sound awfully confrontational,
Yes,
right?
it
And
does.
I think the way that I like to look at it is there's some moments in time, there are some experiences. There comes a time after a series of attempts of seeking freedom
That's right.
that if it isn't moving, right, or if the veil of white supremacy is so stark and strong that we have been having sit-ins and conversations and negotiating over our freedom for hundreds of years, at some point, similar to our civil rights movement, right? At some point, it might require a little bit of disruption of those systems that are continuing to
apologize
inflict
for
those
that. No,
harms.
I'm not suggesting
Not
you
at all,
apologize,
right?
right.
Like those sit-in when our, I want to say ancestors, not all of them are ancestors yet, right? But for our elders who were told that you're not supposed to be in that restaurant, or you're not supposed to be in that neighborhood or drink from that water fountain. Did folks think that that was confrontational back then, to go and drink at that fountain anyway?
Absolutely,
to go
yes.
and take a seat at that restaurant and have a burger, right?
Sure.
So it's the same, right? I don't know, confrontational, folks can call it whatever they like, frankly, right? But it's an intentional civil disobedience. It's an intentional disruption of a system that is constantly harming Black lives and disrupting our lives, right? And so it needs to be disrupted.
Absolutely. Now, let's talk about what you're trying to do in Long Beach. You have confronted the Long Beach, I'm using the word again, but
Sure.
with the Long Beach Police Department, and you're at odds with them in terms of how they deal with the mentally ill, and people have mental challenges. Explain what you're trying to do with that. And you were just in front of the City Council trying to present a proposal with that. Explain
Sure.
that.
Sure. I'm from Long Beach. Been here from LA, Compton, since I was about 8 years old. Went to Lafayette, went to Los Cerritos, Jefferson, Wilson, Lakewood, and have had my own share of observations and experience of our police department here. Long Beach PD has a history of abuse. Just now I was trying to think of his name in Signal Hill.
Ron Settles.
Ron Settles, right? There are a number of incidences. I don't want to try to call those names in from that far back. They're all not going to come to me. But that abuse has been in existence. And so, but to come more current in this movement of Black lives and folks finding their voice in being willing to call out these harms and call out this abuse, what we're noticing is that it isn't just necessarily about the Long Beach Police Department. We live in a city where it looks like the Long Beach Police Department is more of a tool. It's more of a tool that is used by this city to maintain its control, to gain and manage powers that it's trying to maintain. Some may even argue part of that is a maintenance of white supremacy that exists in our city. And so we have to be thoughtful about how we disrupt this status quo of this maintenance of power that excludes Black community. That includes gentrification, that includes how we deal with mental illness, that includes how we're policing our youth, how we are funding and contracting Long Beach Police with our Long Beach Unified School District, which is tough. I have friends who are school psychologists who are telling me that they can only get part-time work or being laid off because of budget cuts or other reasons why Long Beach Unified School District isn't funding school psychologists and counselors and staffing them at levels that it used to be. But on the other hand, can afford, $1 million contracts with Long Beach Police, who are seeking to, it's not that relationship that our counselors and psychologists have with our children in order to help prevent these school shootings, for example, right? But instead, intimidating and threatening and often harassing students who are being kids type situations. It's harmful.
So you're talking about that the city of Long Beach should reallocate their budget priorities in terms of addressing this issue of mental illness and the police department in some ways.
Right.
Correct?
So city of Long Beach has what, about a $3 billion budget. Over half of our city's budget goes to the police. And when I think about where these resources are going, and I'm thinking about, and I have to say these names, they're coming to me in this moment: Dante Jordan, Tyler Woods, Hector Morejon, Noel Aguilar, Faraz Marad, Jason Consenti, Barry Pratt, Lionel Gibson. There's a woman, Cindy Tomlins, right? A police officer rammed her car chasing her and killed her as a result. And between these, not only direct violence by the police department, but also other forms of violence committed against particularly people who were naming and calling out their abuses. And I'm thinking of Cesar Rodriguez, who was not murdered by them, but certainly retaliated against by them when he named their abuses. We're spending millions of dollars on their abuse. How many years ago? 2 years ago or so, we pushed to raise, I don't know, 30 million or so in sales tax revenue. We've spent more than that in lawsuits. They're in federal court now behind chasing the young man, I had to jot his name down, Cesar Rodriguez, on the Blue Line last year. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
They're in federal court now behind that. There's a Citizens Police Complaint Commission that is this facade of a place for citizens to go to say, hey, I had an issue with this officer. He assaulted me in some kind of way. Or when people bring these concerns directly to the police, it's this commission that's supposed to help to hold police accountable, right? But they don't. And most folks who are aware of the CPCC know it. More folks actually don't even know that they exist. And there was a commissioner, I'm trying to think of his name, Thomas Gonzalez, I think, who said, look, you're not even bringing the cases to us. And they're hearing about them in other ways. And the cases you are bringing to us, they're being directed by the city manager, by folks who are positioned by the city manager and under the direction of Pat West. Saying we're aware of these certain harms that have been committed. We're aware of how this particular murder happened when you shot Tyler Woods in the back over 20 times, right? We're aware of what really took place, and we're aware of how you're trying to manipulate these reports to say otherwise. And it's our job as commissioners to really work through what this accountability process needs to look like, right? And then you have folks like the Police Officers Association coming in, right, the city attorney coming in, trying to balance this out. And what ended up happening is that they felt exposed, similar to how they got exposed for using tiger text, for committing a violation possibly of Penal Code Section 135 that says that they should not be destroying or concealing evidence, right? And their internal affairs investigators and homicide investigators have been. But this guy said, look, bring these cases to us as you should. They drugged that man through the dirt. And he sued them, and he just won $736,000. They are wasting our money. You mentioned mental health. I'll give you this quick story. Is that okay?
Yes, go right ahead.
Our mental health community, Long Beach is finally in a place, has been in a place to at least be attempting to have real conversations about how to tend to our homeless community and our mental health community. And it doesn't feel realistic, right? One of our councilmen, and I'm going to say Al Austin because it was public, it was right on Facebook, seemed excited to announce how he swept out the belongings of some homeless families here in North Long Beach. I forget, next to the one of the railroad companies. And there were some comments on his page about it. And so the attempt to really tend to really address how we tend to those needs doesn't feel genuine. And my concern, based on how police are tending to respond to our mental ill community, is because they're trained to kill, is to show up intimidating and violently and antagonistic and in threatening manners that exacerbate situations that our folks who are going through a psychotic episode are experiencing. The story, we work with so many different organizations throughout Long Beach, including in the faith community. And one of our folks at a church gave us a call and said a man who looked disheveled, looked really homeless, he was talking to himself, clearly seemed to be having a psychotic episode. He came in and he kind of spooked her. She's white. He kind of spooked her, because she's like, how did he get in our administrative offices, And so he got in there and he's mumbling and she's like, getting over her initial immediate fear or not fear, but her surprise, and offered him some water. Are you hungry? What do you need? What's up? Right? What can we do for you? And continued to mumble, and she stood up to get a little closer to him, and he attempted to touch her behind. And she said, from his demeanor, and he seemed a little, maybe possibly disabled, right? She said, I could have walked fast and gotten away from him. Like, I was not fearful for my life. And I refused to call the Long Beach Police Department because this person is clearly in need of some mental support. And we called around to the different health agencies, and all of them, our health department, our mental health department, Access, another mental health support program, all are directed to refer people to the Long Beach Police Department. What do they have that our experts, we are full of community experts, our community psychologists, child psychologists, clinical psychologists, correctional psychologists.
So you're thinking that they should probably in some cases be the first responder
Absolutely.
to that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Instead of the police department.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right? Like they paid $60,000 a year over at Cal State Long Beach to be these experts, right?
Now, you were just went to a city council meeting and presented your proposal to do that. Is this the kind of things that you're trying to do in the city of Long Beach, at least with the police department, in terms of changing that policy or philosophy in first responders?
Yeah, I think that's one of them. I think given the, there's an economic detriment that this police department is causing the city. They're costing us a lot of money. It feels like they're becoming more of a liability than an asset. And we're over-policed. You saw the recent article about the Blue Line where I had to jot this down to Long Beach only. I'm going to answer your question. Long Beach only, they were granted about, there was a $646 million fund, and Long Beach received part of that with LAPD and LA County Sheriff. And they only patrol 4 miles and only 8 stations. There's a total of 98 miles of station and 93 stations, 98 miles of rail and 93 stations. Their number of arrests, 1,450 arrests, were over half. There were only about 2,000 people total arrested on all of our rails of 93 stations, and they only have 8. And they had 1,450 arrests and a murder, right? So I think the over-policing, the cost with these lawsuits, and the harm and violence that they're committing on our community, the distrust, the use of tiger text, destroying information, the Fred Taft family, Fred Taft, rest his spirit. In fact, this weekend we're having a gathering for him at Pan American Park at 1 o'clock.
Yes, that was the African-American gentleman that was shot by someone that they have not arrested
It's
yet.
believed to have been a white supremacist.
Yes.
The family and community have been organizing, held its own community investigation, its own, putting out notices for a reward that community and the family had to organize around to get the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors to offer their reward, because Long Beach said that's not what they do. This is an area where Fred Taft was murdered, where it is well known, a lot of law enforcement officers live in this Lakewood Village area, okay, at Pan Am Park, right at Centralia in between Bellflower and Clark Streets. A lot of sheriff, judges, prosecutors, Long Beach officers, and LAPD, and the attention that the police have been putting on this case of this black man that was killed by what looks like a it looked like a hate crime,
Yes.
right? And so based on witness testimony and some other testimony by the community about the amount of hate that exists in that area and racism that exists in that area, the police have seemed hands off. They've mishandled this case in a number of ways. I think the family will come out more about that another time. But because of this extent of harm and distrust that this department has brought to our community, yes, we've presented them with a set of demands at City Council. And one of those demands is to say, Pat West, you probably need to go. It's time for you to go.
Well,
Chief Luna.
We're out of time
Sure.
right now. Maybe at another time we can come and continue that discussion, but what your organization is doing is something that is very different in the city,
Yeah.
and it's provocative, and we will see how all this plays out. Now, when is the next time you guys really quick go into the City Council to follow up on this proposal?
All of our information when we have our public actions or attending City Council or events like supporting the Fred Taft family or Dante Jordan, is his 5-year his Angelversary will be at Seaside Park on November 10th. And all that information will be on our Facebook page,
Okay.
On Twitter, and that's where people can find information for where we'll be next.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dawn Modkins, for your explanation of your organization, and we look forward to seeing some of the things that you're guys trying to do in the city of Long Beach.
Thank you.
That was Dawn Modkins, who is the co-founder of the Black Lives Matter organization, and visiting us on Conversations with Erroll Parker. We'll be back next week with more exciting guests. Good night. In a democracy, citizens need to be informed about policies, issues, homelessness, law enforcement, and social services. In order for people to make good decisions that affect their lives, they need to be informed. Conversations with Erroll Parker.